Thank you so much for tuning in. We have got so many items to hit today, and I'm going to hit them in record time to get you back out on the street where you're needed, or back in the coffee shop, or in your home, or wherever it's going to be, talking about these items. Thanks so much for staying tuned. Well, we've got the so-called leader of the Islamist extremist regime in Iran, and I call him Mr. Mojtaba Khomeini, son of the Ayatollah Khomeini, who, as you know, was blown into hell with quite a number of other senior extreme Islamists. And the health condition of Mojtaba Khomeini is somewhat in question. They say he's lost a leg. They say he's been badly injured, and his face is damaged, and he had pneumonia for a while. Anyway, he apparently is still the leader, and he's talking in a way that reflects what I've been reporting on the last week. There's a split within the regime, and first of all, there's no such thing as Islamist extremist moderates, but some aren't quite as willing to go nuclear as Khomeini and his group is in the IRGC. So he came out with very strong words. He said the only place for Americans is at the bottom of the sea, and that strong language, it's interesting how the smallest things can send the price of oil rocketing, and Brent oil shot up to $126. So that's going to be reflecting, but keep in mind the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, that country, that nation, surprised everybody. We were one of the first to report it right here. You heard it first, or among the first. They've left the oil-producing bloc called OPEC. As they start to flood the market with their own oil and gas products, you're going to see the price go down. So let's see what happens right now. But it is at a standoff in Iran. The extremist theologists there who want to see the use of nuclear weapons. They have said that. They've said they want to blow Israel into eternity with a nuclear bomb. Trump and the Americans seem to be, and the Israelis, are the only ones who believe that. And that's where the standoff is. We'll see who is going to win on that particular regard. Now, keep in mind, when the price of oil changes up or down, governments and their own budgets are very much affected. So the Canadian budget, which we talked on, again, even before some of the elements were coming out, we were giving that news to you beforehand, is very much dependent, a big part of it, on the royalties or the taxes they take from oil and gas companies. Same with our provincial budgets. And the budget that Prime Minister Carney tabled was based on oil being at a certain price. That's going to wildly fluctuate, we believe. I think over the long term, it's going to come down. And with the oil price in the longer term coming down, that means less money for the government, less taxes. So the deficit that Prime Minister Carney is talking about, which would be $50 billion a year, at least until the year 2031, is devastating. Remember, the single greatest cause of inflation, not the only reason, the single greatest cause of inflation, to my regular listeners and watchers, is what? Governments spending borrowed money. Say it again, please. Government spending borrowed money is the single greatest reason that we have inflation and the power of our purchasing dollar drops. That's at the grocery store, that's in our homes, that's wherever. And the federal government is a high stakes, high risky game that they are playing. They will not, my prediction will be, they will not be getting the money, the taxes they so desperately need from oil and gas, because I think in the longer and midterm that price is going to drop. That means they're going to tax you and me more. That means we're going to have less incentive to work hard. It's a vicious downward circle that the government seems to be focused on now. Along with that, very surprising that when the budget was first dropped and announced, the mainstream media, CBC, even CTV, was running out there saying what a wonderful budget it is. Look at this. It's not as bad as we thought. Oh my goodness, Prime Minister Carney is such a genius. They were all talking about, none of them talked about what's only come out the last 2 days, is that the federal government will be reducing the health transfer of money to provinces. They'll be reducing that in provinces that are already hit with huge costs, gigantic lineups, people putting off life-saving surgery for months, in some cases years. This is not the fault of the doctors, not the fault of the practitioners. They are good people trapped in a bad system. But folks, I'm going to say it again, you will not have any relief in the Canadian system, provincial or federal, until we get away from this ridiculous notion that we can only have one delivery model. Canada is the only democracy in the world that does not offer choice of delivery in healthcare. The UK allows it, Australia allows it, New Zealand allows it. None of their lineups are as long and their wait times are as long as ours, and yet they still have universal healthcare as we can have here. That means nobody pays, nobody has to pay. But here we are saying there can be a system where everybody's wait line is shortened, whether it's an emergency room or waiting for life-giving care. But nobody will talk about it. Politicians are afraid about it, are afraid to even talk it, because whenever you have the culturally Marxist media thinking that a politician is going to come up with anything except the terrible system we have, they absolutely will shoot those politicians out of the saddle. They will attack them. They will heap holy fire on them, and the politicians know that, and so they keep quiet. And that's going to continue unless we change that ridiculous perspective that we've got. The only democracy in the world that does not allow people choice of healthcare. Well, we'll watch and we'll see if that, in fact, is going to have an effect or not. It's interesting to watch also in Europe, more and more intensity against the United States, because the United States wants to stop Iran having a nuclear weapon, and they want that Strait of Hormuz, where so much of the world trade goes through, to be left open for all nations. Just those two things. That's all the Iranian government has to say is, we will stop our pursuit of nuclear weaponry, and we will allow the Strait of Hormuz to be open. That's it. But they won't say it. And here you have NATO. Here you have Germany, the Chancellor Friedrich Merz, attacking the U.S. for wanting to accomplish these two things. And the U.S. is responding quite rightly. They're saying Germany can't even handle Ukraine. What the German government has been doing is buying their oil and gas from Russia, funding the war, funding Putin, paying Putin to kill Ukrainian soldiers. And now they go after the U.S. for being the ones to want to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. So it's been fascinating to watch that debate. Well, King Charles, I call him my king because I'm a Canadian and he apparently is King of Canada still. I call him my guy. I've met his mother, his deceased mother, Queen Elizabeth. Met her on 2 occasions. Wonderful woman, inspiring woman. Anyway, he's been very interesting. Gave his speech at the joint session there in the United States at the Capitol, and basically it was pretty good. But he was reflecting. His part of his title is Defender of the Faith. That's his constitutional title in the UK. And he talked about Christianity, which was good in his speech, but he also talked about other religions as if they were equal in all ways. They're just not. And here, literally almost to the hour while he was speaking in London at the beautiful, and I've been there, beautiful gardens in London, you had yet another Islamist maniac stabbing Jews at random. And there is Prime Minister Starmer, who has been afraid and terrified to say anything about crime if it's Islamists who are doing it. And he's saying all that while the king, there's the king in the U.S. trying to say that we're all the same. It is not the case, folks. And here, a fascinating thing to see. Did you see Ilhan Omar? She, of course, is a representative from Minnesota. And she has always been chanting out there with the protesters, sometimes violent protesters over the last year, the big No Kings rally, all those rallies saying No Kings, which are directed against Trump, of course. And yet when a king shows up on the Capitol Hill, they just swarm to be in selfies with him. They fall all over him. They love the guy, as they should. I like the guy too. Very interesting. And Ilhan Omar right up there, trying to get in with him and being his good goods right after she's come off a major speech in which she references World War XI. She was trying to say World War II. She said World War XI. Anyway, I digress. The flag debate is getting interesting in the U.S. because now you have certain states, left-leaning states for sure, saying they are going to fine certain cities if they don't change their flags. And there's this debate going on about state flags, and any states that are still flying their state flag, which is a state where whatever the flag was when they joined the U.S. some as long as 250 years ago. They say those flags are now colonialist, and those flags should not, the original flag should not be allowed to be flown. So huge debate on the flags, and actually an interesting one because you're getting pushback in Minnesota. The flag that Ilhan Omar and others want remarkably resembles the flag of Somalia. You take a look at that, take the two, there's pictures out there, the two flags side by side. So flag debate. And look at this other one that's going on in these culture wars. The city of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we're going to talk about Canadian cities in a minute here. The city of Ann Arbor, Michigan, the mayor there, Chris Taylor, and the entire council has said, brace yourselves, they've ordered that all the signs that have been up for a couple of decades in neighborhoods that say neighborhood watch. You know the neighborhood watch? It's famous really across Canada, across the U.S. to push back the crime waves where criminals love to go into neighborhoods, break into homes. They know they won't get jailed because of liberal judges. And the mayor of Ann Arbor and the council have determined that these signs are not, are you ready, inclusive enough. When those thieves come into your neighborhood and they see that neighborhood watch sign, they don't feel welcome. They don't feel included. And so the mayor has said, take all the signs down. 600 neighborhood watch signs coming down. This is a cultural item, folks. It's spreading to other cities. I've said for a long time, people wanting to run for politics don't always think you've just got to run federal. There's huge impact in the municipalities. Well, while the situation continues to roll out, we see in Canada some very interesting, again, items relative to the budget. The federal government has said our budget's going to get worse. The deficit, the debt is not going to go away. And at the same time, look at some of the things they're announcing spending on. Look at the number of millions of dollars that the federal government is going to be spending on beeper systems for whales. I'm not making this up. It's in there. Beeper systems for whales. You can find out where they are all the time. Folks, I did some research on this with the Environmental Research Institute. That institute is not a right-wing institute. It's a severely left-wing institute. And according to their number of whales around the world swimming around our oceans is over 1.5 million. 1.5 million whales, and a number of those species are increasing, as we've talked about. Humpback whales increasing, and the government, in a time where we are in deficit, millions and millions are going into whale beeper systems. The government is also millions and millions of dollars going into supporting various types of sports. Now, listen, I'm a big believer in sports support, if I can use that word carefully, and a fan of athletics. The Stephen Harper approach, as we talked about, a conservative approach, is give tax rebates for citizens wanting to have their kids in sports. But this thing, when you are in debt and deficit and you are plowing money into these areas, it reflects what Premier Eby in British Columbia, for our U.S. viewers, the province of British Columbia is controlled by a socialist government, the NDP, and he has refused to speak up strongly about the real problems in British Columbia, refused to be strong on crime, refused to be strong on these free drug programs, refused to be strong on elements related to biological men competing against women, silent on those things, silent on issues about losing constitutional control of property rights, quiet, but wow, he's just come out fighting, folks, because it's been rumored that a fairly popular soccer team, the Whitecaps in Vancouver, might be leaving. Why? Taxes are high. They're not making enough money. And he has stood up and said he's going to fight with everything he's got to keep them from leaving. Folks, if there are sports teams that want to come or stay in our cities and provinces, let them do that on their own dollar. You'll find citizens will support, citizens will show up, and if citizens aren't supporting, and if they're not showing up, and they're not willing to pay the high and horrendous price of food and drink at professional games, then you let those teams go. We're talking about, I don't care if it's hockey or baseball or football, multi-million-dollar hockey players and athletes, and I don't begrudge that. It's fantastic. Multi-million-dollar owners in sports franchises, and all taxpayers wound up getting hit for that. The mums, the grandmas, or the men who aren't interested in sports wind up paying for the subsidies that governments use to bring them to town. They always say, well, at the net end, this brings in more money and it's an economic generator. Not necessarily. That money will, there's a lot of reports out there and studies that show that the money, if people are allowed to spend where they wish, the money will be spent anyway, and it's not going to necessarily impact things. That's an argument for another day. But here we have Premier Eby. Finally, he's standing up and he's going to do everything he can to keep a professional bunch of millionaires from leaving because they're tired of getting taxed so much. Well, switching over to, if you've noticed, one of our favorite topics, Disney and everything they're up to, they've now said that if you're riding on their rides, you're not going to be allowed to show your phones. They've got to be in your purse or your pockets. Some good reason for that, because a lot of people get on those wild rides, which are a lot of fun. Used to take our kids on them, and they put the phones on those the selfie sticks, and they hang them out there, and the phones are dropping, they're hitting people, and they're saying no more of that. They're also saying bottles. There's this increasing tendency, and people are free to do this, I don't mind, it's not just carrying the little water satchels around. People now are carrying huge jugs, like 2-gallon jugs of water wherever they go, because you never know when famine could hit you before you get home. And those bottles, now they're building special cells for them because the bottles are flying off the rides and in danger of hitting people. Folks, the rides are usually about 2 minutes in length. I just want to tell you something. You will not die of thirst while you're on a ride. Famine will not hit you while you're on a ride. You can safely store that bottle. Well, the women's NBA, the Women's Basketball Association, it's a great association. They seem to be doing well. I like the fact that they're doing well. Again, sports themselves are becoming a cultural focus and a cultural channel. And these professional leagues, they actually like it because it gets more eyes on their sport. And so when they're bringing in their romantic endeavors, actually WNBA and the NBA, they like it. So here we have Lexi Brown, very famous player, good player. Like watching her the few times I watched WNBA, and her relationship or alleged relationship with an NBA player, Klay Thompson. You may not have heard of him, but Klay apparently was also involved with Megan Thee Stallion. That's not a horse, that's a woman. And all of this is sort of spilling out. So they're not talking about the tactics of play and what you do under the hoop and the time clock. They're talking about something else. And folks, keep in mind, some people say, well, men should be forced to watch the WNBA. Taxpayer dollars should be going to women's sports, force people to go. No, there should be no taxpayers, male or women's sports. Let the audience be attracted. I love athletics. I love sports. And I like to watch the sports where I'm watching the best in the world. And the best in the world are usually those who are physically strongest. Mind you, there's a lot of women's sports I like watching. Don't get me upset. But I know that the top high school teams in the United States, boys, top basketball teams in the United States, high school, can beat the top women's NBA teams. That's just a fact. And maybe we'll see one of those games one of these days. I don't know. And it's no fault of the women. Just boys are stronger. 18-year-old boys are stronger at the top of their game. And so we watch all this unfold. I just don't want to see taxpayer dollars going into subsidizing leagues, men or women. The beer wars continue, and we see again in sports and culture here. Miller Lite has taken a different approach than Bud Light. If you remember Bud Light, they tried about 2 years ago. They brought in, what was the name of the guy you remember? Yeah, Dylan Mulvaney, biological male, and dressing up as a woman and running around with the Bud Light. Worst marketing decision ever made by Bud Light. Crashed their numbers, crashed their stock, was a disaster. And Miller Lite is taking the other approach. Just recently, if you've seen it again, if you follow this stuff, there's a very attractive woman, and she is standing there in an ad. It's Olivia Dunn, by the way, very attractive woman, standing there cheering at a game. It's a Mets game, I believe, and she's holding, guess what? A Miller Lite, not a Bud Light. So Miller Lite taking the same approach that American Eagle took, not being ashamed to have beautiful women in their ads, talking about Cindy McSweeney there. And regardless of people saying it was racist, I still haven't figured what's racist about a beautiful woman, black or white or green. I don't care what color. But anyway, so that's been paying off for Miller Lite. And the Sports Reporter has been covering some of that. Joe Kinsey has been talking about the fact that it's been well over a year since Bud Light has even had a woman in an ad. Sure, they've dumped the trans guy, but they won't even put a woman in the ad. What on earth is going on? Follow the dollar, folks. If Bud Light, they need to shake up on their board for supporting this kind of policy. Well, we're concerned about kids on phones. And guess what? Kids are even concerned about that. Lots of groups forming among Gen Zs to help get away from the addiction of the phones. And now there's a company, it's the Tin Can Phone. And this is an entrepreneur. It's a Seattle company, a startup. The guy's name is Chet Kittleson. And his phones, the orders are literally, if I can say this, off the wall, hundreds of thousands in Canada and the US. This particular phone is wired to the wall. Hello, do you remember those days? And the contact list, the list on the phones, because it's Bluetooth activated, is only the contacts you want on the phones. And kids apparently are liking it. Parents are liking it. And it's back to the old days. Remember when you had to kind of talk quietly into the phone because it was usually like in the kitchen or the hallway and your parents could hear you? Well, that's roaring back, folks, in popularity. We'll see if it continues. I don't know. I want to close out the show here with a bit of a sober remark here. Cole Thomas Allen, this is the nut bar lunatic who tried to kill people at the correspondence dinner the other night. And he's being praised by the left and by Democrats and socialists because, are you ready for this? He's a Christian, did you know? He talked in his manifesto, an insane manifesto, where he tries to say it's okay to kill public officials. They're talking about the fact he's a Christian. Folks, and I've been encouraging people to speak up on this, when a person who identifies as a Christian is excusing the fact that you can murder people, and we're not talking about warfare, we're not talking about sometimes citizens are killed in collateral damage of war, that's awful and it's heartbreaking, but when somebody is deliberately promoting the killing of public officials and other citizens they disagree with, that is not Christian. And I'd like to see my Muslim friends, and I have many, and the Islamist community stand up and also say no when it's a person who is praising Allah and saying Allah is great. By the way, when media says he said God is great, no, he didn't. These guys, not Alan here, when the Islamist killers do this, they say Allah. So let's be clear about that. If you're a Muslim, and it's some guy who identifies or woman as a Muslim is killing people in public, and people are making excuses and saying, yeah, we can understand them, do they? No. You need to stand up and you say this is not the Muslim faith. If it's not the Muslim faith, if Islam is a religion of peace, then you've got to denounce your own people when they're out on killing sprees. And I say that to the Christian community. And the Christian community largely does stand up and say if it's a Christian lunatic who's talking about killing public figures and saying that's okay, let's stand up. Let's speak the truth. Speak the truth in love. Let's speak the truth. Folks, thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.